going to walk you through the patch for the track 1.wave on my new album 7.waves, which is all done on the Buchla 200E modular electronic instrument. I had planned on doing 3.wave and 4.wave patch explanation, but I realized that so much of that is in the DAW, and I didn't want to try to explain, all the different things I'm doing in the DAWs as editing files and stuff. So this is just all Buchla, only the effects are in the DAW, so I think that this is going to be a much more interesting patch exploration. The way that the track is kind of made up is it has essentially 4 parts, 4 tracks. The one is the sequence. Track 2 is the bass, and track 3 and 4 are 2 outputs of the 272E. Now, what makes this kind of interesting, I think, is that the 272E, I'm using tuner B and tuner C, and I have tuner B set to 87.5, and I have tuner C set to 107.5, which are the 2 ends of the dial, so to speak. So what I'm going to do is kind of sweep through those 2 frequency ranges, those 2 tuners, and the frequency ranges starting from the left to the right and the right to the left. And then at a certain point they will intersect, which is kind of interesting in concept, but you can't always hear it, but it is a pretty cool kind of phasing effect when those 2 frequencies cross over. The way I'm sweeping through the CV is I have a patch cable coming from my Kane 282E going into the CV inputs for the 272E. And in the 282E, I have 2 functions defined. One starts at 0 and goes to peak. The other starts at peak and goes to 0. And they both have a 160-second time series, which is, 2 minutes and 40 seconds. So they will sweep from the bottom to the top, and the top to the bottom, and the top to the bottom, and the bottom to the top. And so that is, I'll give you kind of a preview of what the radio stations sound like right now. They sound like that, because here in Seattle we have nothing at 87.5 or 107.5. The sequence is programmed into the 251E, and it is a simple 8-stage sequence, so 0 to 7. And I kind of just experimented a bit to come up with this. So it's just it goes 0.4, 0.7, 0.4, 0.7, 1.1, 0.9, 1.3, and 1.4. So all roughly within an octave range, just a little bit, a couple semitones up into the second octave. And that came from, I actually experimented with that on the 252E. That's how I pulled that sequence together, because I found that the 252E was just a lot more, dare I say, fun or expressive to figure out how I wanted to patch that sequence. So I have it in the 252E as well, but I'm not using that just because in the 251E I was able to match the clocks for the sequence and the bass easier and better. Plus the 251E has this master clock multiplier that goes up to 1.5, and I liked being able to use that to dial in the speed for the 2 sequences that go together, the sequence and the bass. So the bass is just 4 notes with no pitch change. And that's another thing about the 251E that I really liked, was that per stage I was able to set a duration. So first stage is ×1, second stage is a rest, third stage is a transient, and then fourth stage is a transient, and the fifth stage, or that 4 stages, yeah. The thing is, this is a 0-based array, so it gets confusing sometimes when trying to explain it. But so stage 0 is 1-2 interval, 1-2 interval rest, 1-1 interval, 1-2 interval. And so it gets just a nice slow bass. Audio-wise, the sequence is the 259E, and the bass is the 258E dual programmable oscillator. So the Twisted Waveform Generator 259E, I'm using in kind of a simple way. I have the modulation oscillator is just modulating warp, and then I've selected the same part of the memory bank, number 3, for both A and B oscillators. And or I should say A and B banks, number 4 in that, or number 3 in that stage. Gosh. Well, let me back up a bit. Okay. In the memory bank, the morph goes between green and red, and 3 is chosen for both the green and the red. Okay. And then in the 258E, I just have one section, no modulation or anything. It's just a sine wave. So I'm going to go turn up the 261 or the 259E. Let's just bring that loud here. And that is going into the 291E triple morphin filter. Buzzes a little bit, but that's okay. I wanted that. So the 259E is going into input A on the 291E, which is set to a default frequency for the filter, and then the resonance is also set. I'm not modulating the resonance, but I am modulating the filter frequency with the CV output of the modulation oscillator in the 259E. Then the 259E and the 258E are both going into the 292H, which is being modulated by the 281H that has pulse outputs going from the 251E for each of the two stages. And it's actually a pretty straightforward patch. You know, there's not a lot going on in it because I wanted to have kind of a focus on the radio part. You know, the interesting thing is hearing the sweeping of the radio. So let me go ahead and kind of demonstrate what that sounds like. I'm going to turn up the radio part and then start the 282E. So it's cycling through the stations at the same rate, you know, on opposite sides of the radio spectrum. And when I was coming up with this, I thought, man, you know, I really want to sweep through it the way that we would an analog tuner. But as I mentioned in last month's episode of the podcast where I talked about the 272E, it uses digital tuners. So there's always going to be this click thing. You know, like you're clicking a detented knob as you turn it. And you can actually feel that in the encoder. It's got steps. It's a stepped encoder. So you can kind of hear that click, like there's an envelope with each one with a fast attack. And it stops just long enough to sound kind of interesting.
From the state of
Are you approaching too fast? Can you stop in time if a collision is about to happen?
So what I'm going to do now is pop over to my DAW, and I'm going to turn on the delay effect that I'm using with the 272E. Let me see here. There we go. And now I'll bring the 272E back into the mix.
Zillow just brings more to the table. One of the
Start that over. Okay. There we go. So I've added an effect using Valhalla Delay. I'm using a preset that I customized called After Death, and it's a reverse pitch type delay.
Button. Wow. They cracked through in about...
Now, what I did in my recording of this on the album is I actually had two different tracks for each of the tuners in the 272E, so that I was able to adjust the Valhalla Delay individually. Unfortunately, though, for this demo, I needed to use one of my inputs for the microphone, so I had to sum those two tuners to one track. So it's not quite the same, but it's pretty close.
It's truly laid out.
I'll show you what I mean. I'll bring up the track here.
I told Jake.
Don't wait.
There we go.
So at home.
These symptoms don't.
To a hood.
So now you can hear the pitch, like the delay of it is reversed, and the pitch is going up as opposed to the natural pitch of the sound. So it makes this kind of ghostly, neat effect
Offers numerous.
that when sent through reverb is also really, really cool.
Reheat your rod.
So I'll stop that for just a moment. Let that reverb tail go away. Now let's listen to let's hear what the sequence is going to be like. Here's the raw sound. Okay, and I'll start the sequence just so we hear it by itself. Oops, now, I am in my studio and you're going to hear all kinds of stuff happen. That's just that's the way it goes sometimes. Okay, so this is the sequence. And while I like it, I felt that it really needed something to add some movement to it. And I didn't want to transpose it because it's supposed to be really repetitive like that. So I went to my trusty Valhalla Delay. So that adds a nice kind of tail to it. So we can adjust the filter. Then it adds kind of a silence in there a little bit. So that's a rough approximation of how the sequence comes together. Now the bass is a little different. Let me turn off the effect here. Yeah, I've got a delay going there. Let me fix that. There we go. Now, one difference that if you listen to this track on the album versus how you're hearing it now is that I'm using the 292H, not the 292E. There's one variation there. Also, I'm using different channel output and a few other variances, so it colors the sound a little bit between the two. So I'm getting, like, I can get interference when using the microphone. But don't worry about all of that. You can hear the complete finished track on the album and get exactly what it sounds like. But here I'm using a longer release, or decay I should say, on the 281H. So it sounds like this. There we go. So I'm using Devil Lock from Soundtoys to add kind of a little bit of a crush and crunch to the bass. And that's primarily because two things. One, because of I'm hard of hearing, it's difficult for me to perceive low frequency sounds just kind of on my own, or on their own, I should say. So I had to look at this in a spectral analyzer and some other tools to see where the frequencies were. And I thought, well, I want to hear it. So I used the audio level destroyer, the Devil Lock, to crush and crunch it a bit, to bring in some harmonics to those sine waves so that I could enjoy them. And so the way the track works is it starts with this, and then it brings in the radio, and then it brings in the sequence. So the way I did that when I recorded it, to keep everything playing together, I had the volume of the sequencer turned all the way down. And first I brought in the tuner. And then hit start on the
Because we care.
sequence. And then I slowly brought up the sequence with automation. I like that dwarfy sound that's going on in there right now.
Something with NASA.
And that's it. That's how One Dot Wave came together. I hope you enjoyed this. If you're watching this on the YouTube video, I will include some additional notes in the description about the various modules that I used and the patches between them. I hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to check out the actual track on my album 7 Dot Waves, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Music, and everywhere else, or go to the site robstand.com, where I have a link to the album. Thanks for watching and listening. Hope you enjoyed it.